My name is Elijah, and I am 72 years old. I was standing in my quiet house polishing my good leather shoes, getting ready for my weekly Sunday dinner at my daughter's house. I was just deciding which bottle of wine to bring a heavy Cabernet that she likes when my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Desmond, my lawyer for 30 years. He never texts. 4 words lit up the screen, burning themselves into my memory. Call me immediately, Elijah. My heart seized in my chest. I put the wine bottle down on the counter. My hand was shaking so slightly I almost did not notice it. I dialed his number. Desmond did not say hello. He said, "Elijah, where are you? Are you alone?" His voice was thick with urgency. "I have just received a formal legal request," he said. "An attorney downtown representing Jada has petitioned for your complete medical and financial records. Elijah, your own daughter is preparing to have you declared legally incompetent." I stood there in the home I had built and learned that my only child was planning to destroy me. She was filing for a conservatorship. She wanted to take everything. And in that very moment, I made a choice. I was still going to that Sunday dinner. I was going to look my betrayer right in the eye. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner, what truths I uncovered, and what plan my dead wife Coretta set in motion 5 years ago to stop this very day, let me know in the comments where you are listening to this story from. And please hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight for your own dignity. My ears roared with a white noise like the sound of a distant rushing waterfall. Incompetent me, I am Elijah. I am a retired structural engineer. I built bridges across Georgia that are still standing marvels of steel and concrete designed to withstand forces 100 times greater than themselves. My mind, saints, my entire life has been about precision, about logic, about structure. And just last week, my doctor, a man 20 years younger than me, told me I had the heart and mind of a 50-year-old. I just completed my annual physical. I still manage my own 6-figure stock portfolio, and I do it very well. Elijah, are you there? Desmond asked, his voice sharp, pulling me back from the edge. I am here, I said, my voice turning into a rasp. A conservatorship on what grounds? They are claiming significant cognitive decline, Desmond read from the document, his tone laced with absolute disgust. They allege you are susceptible to undue influence and are making erratic and concerning financial decisions. Erratic decisions. A cold, bitter laugh almost escaped my throat. My erratic decisions. Was he talking about the $200,000 that I gave Jada for the down payment on her palatial mansion in Buckhead, a neighborhood she and her husband Trey had no business living in? I told my wife Coretta it was a loan, but we both knew it was a gift. Or was he talking about the $30,000 a year I have been paying for my grandson to attend a private school? He needs the best start, Daddy, she had cooed to me. This is his future. I am a widower. My wonderful Coretta has been gone for 5 years. 5 years of a silence in this house that is so loud it sometimes feels like a physical presence. Jada and my grandson are all I have left. I thought I was being a good father, a strong grandfather. I thought I was building a legacy of love and support. I see now with a terrible, blinding clarity that I was just building their legal case. In their eyes, I was not a father. I was a resource, a bank vault that was getting old and needed a new set of managers. Desmond. I interrupted my shock, congealing into something hard and cold. Anger. I have dinner at her house tonight, my weekly Sunday dinner. Elijah, you must cancel. Absolutely not, he insisted. You cannot go to say nothing. Tell her you are ill. We need to strategize because you are walking right into the lion's den. A grim smile touched my lips. No, I said, my voice low and steady. The engineer in me was taking over. The part of my brain that sees a stress fracture and immediately calculates the load-bearing capacity. Desmond, I am going. I have to go. I have to act as if I know nothing. I want to look her in the eye while she lies to my face. I want to see what this is. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Desmond has known me for half my life. He knew Coretta. He knows I am not a man who runs away from a fight. All right, Elijah, he said, his voice heavy. All right, but you are a witness tonight. Do not engage with them. Do not argue. Do not under any circumstances drink anything. You do not open yourself. Do not sign anything. Not a birthday card, not a dinner napkin, absolutely nothing. You observe, you smile, and you leave. Come to my office the moment you are done. I do not care what time it is. I will be waiting. We hung up the phone. I looked at the expensive Cabernet I had set out, the one I knew was her favorite. I put it back in the cellar. I went to the pantry and found a cheap bottle of red blend I'd been given at a neighborhood barbecue. If I was attending a performance, I was not going to waste the good props on the actors. I drove my car across the city, the cold Atlanta rain starting a miserable drizzle. The rain blurred the city lights into a watercolor of smears. I thought about the foundations I had built, the steel pylons driven deep into the Georgia red clay to hold against the wind and the water. I had built my family on what I thought was bedrock love, sacrifice, and duty. I was discovering tonight that it was built on sand and the tide was coming in. When I pulled into the sweeping circular driveway of Jada and Trey's home, the house was blazing with lights. It was a $3 million monument to consumption in the heart of Buckhead, and I had paid for the front door. My son-in-law Trey opened it before I could even ring the bell. He has the perpetually damp handshake and insincere smile of a failed car salesman. Elijah. Hey, you made it. We were starting to worry you forgot. I never forget, Trey, I said, handing him the cheap wine. It is Sunday family night. He glanced at the label. A flicker of disappointment crossed his face so fast I might have missed it if I was not looking for it. Great Jada is in the kitchen just putting the finishing touches on dinner. I stepped inside the house. The foyer was 2 stories high with a chandelier that cost more than my first car. The floors were imported Italian marble floors I had helped pay for. The smell of roasted garlic and rosemary filled the air, but all I felt was a cold nausea. Jada glided out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron that looked like it had never seen a genuine food stain. She was 45, beautiful, and the spitting image of her mother. But where Coretta had eyes filled with warmth, Jada had eyes that were bright, hard, and assessing like a jeweler looking for flaws. Daddy, she chirped, coming over to hug me. I braced myself. The embrace was dry, practiced. It did not have the warmth of a daughter. It had the calculation of a co-conspirator. It felt like she was measuring me. You are here. How are you feeling today? I'm fine. Jada, just fine, I said, forcing a smile onto my face. Smells wonderful in here. The dinner was an agonizing, carefully staged play. I thought about Coretta. I thought about how she used to prepare Sunday dinners. The house would smell like collard greens and sweet potato pie. It was a smell of genuine love. Here in this massive Buckhead mansion, everything was catered. The food was expensive, but it lacked a soul, just like the people serving it to me. I watched Trey pour himself another glass of wine, the expensive stuff, not the bottle I brought. He held the glass by the bowl, not the stem, a small detail that always annoyed me. He was a man pretending to be wealthy, using my money to fund the illusion. Trey dominated the conversation, rambling about some new cryptocurrency venture he was exploring. This came from a man who had bankrupted 2 businesses and whose only source of income was his wife's real estate commissions and my checkbook. I just nodded, ate my food, and watched them. I watched the way Jada would correct him with a sharp little glance. I watched the way my grandson sat at the table, his eyes glued to his phone, completely disconnected. This was the family I was erratically funding. Then over dessert, Jada made her move. She set down her fork, placed her manicured hand on mine, and gave me her most concerned, loving smile. "Daddy," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "we have been thinking. We are worried about you." Trey chimed in, suddenly serious. "It is just you have so much on your plate." Jada continued, her thumb rubbing a little circle on the back of my hand. "You have worked your entire life. You have done so much for everyone. You deserve to rest. You do not need to be worrying about stocks or property taxes or managing the big house." When Jada brought up her treacherous proposal, the absolute audacity of it struck me like a physical blow. She sat there wearing a diamond necklace I bought her for her 30th birthday, using the very comfort I provided as a weapon against me. "Let us help," she had said. The word help tasted like poison in my mouth. I had to summon every ounce of discipline, every lesson I learned on the construction sites of Atlanta to keep my face perfectly still. I could not let the anger show. I had to let them believe that their illusion was working. I looked right into her eyes. My daughter, my only child. "What are you suggesting, Jada?" "I am suggesting just that you let us help," she said. "Trey and we can take over the day-to-day. We can manage the finances, make sure all the bills are paid. You can just relax, enjoy your retirement. You would not have to worry about a single thing." There it was. The velvet-gloved hand closing around my life. The polite, loving, reasonable-sounding prison sentence. They wanted to help manage. The exact same words Desmond had warned me about. They wanted to take total control. I looked at her, at my son-in-law, and I smiled. It was the coldest smile of my 72 years. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over my spirit. The engineer was back. The problem was defined. "You know, sweetheart," I said, patting her hand, "that is a very generous thought. A very good idea. Let me think about that." The flash of triumph in her eyes was sickening. She thought I had taken the bait. She thought I was the confused, forgetful old man she was painting me to be. "Of course, Daddy, you just think about it," she said, all warmth and relief. The rest of the dinner was a blur. I excused myself shortly after. At the front door, Jada gave me another one of her cold, dry hugs. She held on a little too long. "Drive safely, Daddy," she whispered into my ear, her voice full of that fake concern. "You know, you have been so forgetful lately. We just worry." It was not a warning. It was a threat. It was the final nail. "Do not you worry about me, Jada," I said, patting her on the back. "I'm clearer than I've been in years." I got into my car. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. I did not drive home. I did not drive back to my empty house in the quiet suburbs. I drove straight through the rainy, dark streets of Atlanta, the windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm like a slow war drum. I drove straight downtown to the glowing windows of the law firm. Desmond was on the 10th floor, and as I pulled up, I could see his light was still on. He was waiting for me. The war had just begun. The drive gave me time to think. I thought about Coretta. I thought about the life we built from absolutely nothing. We started in a tiny apartment over on the west side. I worked double shifts at the construction sites while she went to nursing school. Every single dollar we earned with sweat and with honor. We poured everything into Jada. We gave her the best schools, the best clothes, the very best parts of us, but somewhere along the line that appreciation twisted into expectation. The gratitude turned into greed. I parked my car in the underground garage beneath the towering glass building. The air was damp and smelled of exhaust and wet concrete. I took the elevator up, watching the digital numbers climb. With every floor, the grandfatherly warmth, the hurt, the betrayal, it all burned away. By the time the elevator doors chimed open on the 10th floor, there was no sadness left in my heart. There was only the cold, hard logic of a man who builds things to last and tears down things that threaten to collapse. I walked into the office of Desmond at 9:15 at night. The Atlanta rain was streaming down the floor to ceiling windows, turning the bright lights of downtown into a blurred, watery mess. Desmond had not even taken his suit jacket off. He had a massive stack of papers sitting on his heavy mahogany desk, and 2 cups of black coffee that must have been sitting there for an hour, growing cold and bitter. He did not bother with pleasantries or polite greetings. "How was the dinner?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "It was exactly as you predicted," I said, shrugging off my wet coat. "She offered to help manage my finances. She told me I have been forgetful." She had Trey sitting there nodding along like a lapdog. Desmond nodded grimly, pushing one of the cold coffees toward me. I ignored it. He tapped the thick stack of papers on his desk. They filed the initial petition this afternoon just before the Fulton County Clerk's office closed. That is what triggered my alert system. They are moving fast, Elijah. Faster than I ever expected. He picked up the top sheet of paper. "This is the core of their case, and I'm telling you it is ugly." He slid the paper across the polished wood desk. It was a preliminary declaration, a list of concerns compiled by the attorney representing Jada. "This is not just her word against yours," Desmond said, leaning forward. "They have already retained an expert. They have a name on the payroll." He pointed to a specific line on the document. "Dr. Vance, a forensic psychiatrist." I looked at the name. I'd never heard of him. "And who is Dr. Vance?" I asked. Desmond let out a heavy sigh. "Dr. Vance is what we in the legal world call a hired gun. He is a professional witness. He has a very lucrative, very specific specialty in the state. He testifies in contested conservatorship hearings, and he almost always finds that the wealthy person in question is gravely disabled or lacks mental capacity." I felt a cold chill that had absolutely nothing to do with the freezing rain outside. "You are saying he is a fraud, Desmond." "I am saying Desmond chose his words very carefully, that Dr. Vance has a reputation for finding whatever medical conclusion the person paying his $20,000 retainer needs him to find. He is smooth. He's incredibly convincing. He has all the right credentials from the best medical schools, and he will be the weapon they use to destroy your credibility right there in open court." Suddenly, all the pieces from the dinner clicked perfectly into place. The fake concern, the pointed comments about my memory, the anecdotes she was planting. I said the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Precisely," Desmond said, tapping another page in the file. "A house of cards built entirely on a foundation of lies. They cannot just walk into a courtroom and say, 'Elijah is old, give us his money.' They have to build a narrative. And your daughter Jada is the star narrator." Desmond began to read from the page, his voice flat, completely emotionless. "On October 10th, my father paid the gas company bill twice and failed to pay his electricity bill, causing a severe lapse in service." "Is that true, Elijah?" "No," I said, my anger rising up in my chest. "That is a complete distortion. I switched to automatic payments online. There was an overlap of exactly 1 day. The lapse was a planned 30-minute service switch. I was standing right there for it. "It does not matter," Desmond said. "Here's another one. My father frequently forgets where he has parked his car, leading to hours of dangerous confusion. He has lost his house keys 3 times this month alone." "That is a lie," I snapped, my voice echoing in the quiet office. "I bought a new car. The key fob has a different layout. I pressed the wrong button exactly 1 time and the panic alarm went off. And the house keys, I was installing a new deadbolt on the back door. I had 3 sets of keys sitting on the kitchen counter. She is twisting everything I do. Of course she is, Desmond said, looking me right in the eye. That is the entire point. She is not trying to prove these things to you. She is building a file for Dr. Vance. She will feed him these half-truths, these twisted memories. She will tell him about you forgetting the time tonight. She will paint a tragic picture of a brilliant structural engineer in a rapid, tragic mental decline. Vance will then, for a very hefty fee, write a 7-page report diagnosing you with early-onset dementia or age-related cognitive impairment. I listened as the trap closed around me. He will state under penalty of perjury. Desmond continued that you are a danger to yourself and your own estate. By the time we actually get in front of a judge, it is not the word of Jada against yours. It is your word against a board-certified medical expert. I sat back in my leather chair. The mechanism of the attack was now laid bare before me. It was a terrifyingly simple, elegant, and evil piece of social engineering. They were not just attacking my character. They were attacking the very foundation of my identity, my mind, my competence. I looked at Desmond. The old anger, the hot red emotional anger, was fading away. It was being replaced by the cold, precise calculations of a master builder. When a structure is under attack, you do not curse the storm. You reinforce the load-bearing walls. You find the weak points in the enemy attack. So I said, my voice steady and calm now. They have a hired gun, and they are feeding him ammunition. This Dr. Vance, he has not met me yet. No, Desmond said. That will be the next step. They will file a motion to compel you to submit to a psychiatric evaluation by him. Good, I said, a cold smile forming on my face. Desmond raised an eyebrow. Good, he asked. Good, I repeated. Because we know his name, we know his game, and we know exactly what lies he has been told. He is expecting to meet a confused, forgetful old man. He is expecting the weak person Jada described. He is not expecting me. So I said, my voice quiet in the dim office. We know their strategy. We know they're expert, but I still do not understand the why. Desmond, this is not just greed. This is monstrous to do this to our own father. Why? Desmond leaned back in his leather chair, the springs groaning in protest. He steepled his fingers, looking at me over the top of them. Because Elijah, he said, you are confusing them with rational people. They are not. They are desperate, and desperate people do monstrous things. He swiveled his chair to his computer monitor and clicked his mouse a few times. I took the liberty of running a preliminary asset and debt check on Jada and her husband Trey this afternoon. As soon as I got that petition, I started digging. I have been your estate lawyer for 30 years, Elijah. Your finances are tied to theirs in ways you helped set up. It was not hard to pull the thread. He turned the monitor so I could see it. It was a sea of red numbers and legal names. I thought you were just helping them, Desmond said, his voice flat. I did not realize the extent of it. They are drowning, Elijah. Drowning is a polite word for it, I whispered, seeing the figures. Desmond shook his head. Elijah, they are at the bottom of the ocean. Let us start with the house in Buckhead. The one you put the $200,000 down payment on. They took out a second mortgage on it 8 months ago for $300,000, and that money is entirely gone. He clicked again, and a list of creditors appeared. They have over $150,000 in high-interest credit card debt. American Express Visa, a few store cards from places I have never even heard of. They are servicing that debt by taking cash advances from other cards. It is a classic end-stage pyramid scheme. I felt a cold sickness pooling in my stomach. But Jada, her commissions, she is one of the top real estate agents in Atlanta, I said. She was, Desmond corrected. The market has turned Elijah. High interest rates. Nobody is buying $3 million mansions right now. Her income has dropped by 70% in the last 6 months. but their spending, he gestured to the screen, has not changed at all. And then he pointed to the killing blow. But all of that is just the appetizer, Elijah. This is the main course. He brought up a record of a wire transfer from their joint account, the one tied to the second mortgage. A single transfer of $500,000. What is that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. That Desmond said is the latest sure thing from Trey. A blockchain development startup. It was an unsecured private investment. He essentially gave $500,000 to a man he met at a golf tournament. The company declared bankruptcy exactly 6 weeks later. The money is gone, evaporated into thin air. $500,000. My money, I said, the realization washing over me. Money from the house I helped them buy. So you see, Elijah, Desmond said, turning back to face me. This is not about you being forgetful. This is not about them worrying about your health. This is about that. He tapped the screen with his pen. That $500,000 hole. The credit card bills, the second mortgage payment that is about to come due. They are going to lose the house. They are going to lose everything they have. They are on the absolute brink of a catastrophic, public, humiliating bankruptcy. He let the heavy words hang in the air between us. And then there is you. He continued, his voice softening just a little bit. You are sitting over here in your paid-off house with a clean portfolio. You are worth on paper just over $4 million. I finally understood the full, terrifying scope of the attack. They are not trying to get another loan from me, I said, the cold truth settling deep into my bones. No, Desmond said. You are past that point. They know you will not just hand them $500,000. And even if you did, it would not be enough. They do not need a handout, Elijah. They need the whole bank. They are aiming for your entire $4 million estate. The only way to get it, the only way to liquidate your assets to cover their catastrophic losses is to take total control. And the only way to do that is to have a judge declare you incompetent. It was not just a betrayal of a father. It was a hostile takeover. My own daughter was not just trying to get my money. She was trying to plug the gaping, hemorrhaging wound of her own failure with my life savings. And she was completely willing to sacrifice my mind, my freedom, and my life to do it. I sat there in the office of my lawyer, the silence broken only by the hum of the city and the relentless rhythm of the rain against the thick glass. The hot red anger had passed. It left behind something cold, heavy, and infinitely more dangerous. My focus. I was an engineer. I understood how structures stand and how they fall. And the structure of the attack my daughter was planning was fundamentally flawed. It was built on a false premise. She assumed I was weak. She assumed I was unaware. All right, Desmond, I said, my voice cutting through the quiet room. I leaned forward, resting my hands flat on his desk. They want to say I'm senile. They want to build a medical case based on anecdotes of my confusion. Desmond nodded, his expression grim. That is the playbook, Elijah. Then we will help them, I said. Desmond raised his eyebrows, looking at me like I was crazy. What are you talking about? We fight them, Desmond said. We show the judge your medicals, your financial records. No, I interrupted him, not unkindly. Not yet. You are thinking like a lawyer. You are thinking about defense. I am an engineer and I am thinking about offense. They are building a case, but I will be their star witness. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to be the most forgetful man in the state of Georgia. A slow understanding dawned on the face of Desmond. Elijah, that is dangerous. You would be playing right into their hands. I would be setting a trap, I said, the plan forming in my mind with perfect logical clarity. Right now, they are twisting real events, I said, leaning over the heavy desk. But from now on, I will manufacture the events. I will be in absolute control of the narrative. Jada wants a confused old man, so I will give her one. I will accidentally call her and ask the exact same question twice in 1 hour. I will misplace my keys and call her in an absolute panic. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the wet, shining streets of Atlanta. She is overconfident, Desmond. Trey is greedy and he is stupid. They want to believe this is working. So we will make them believe it. We will let them get arrogant. We will let them walk so far down this path of lies that when we finally pull the rug out, there is absolutely no way back for them. While I'm acting confused, I continued, turning back to him. You and I will be meticulously documenting their every move. We are on the defense in their story, but in ours, they are the criminals and we are the detectives. Desmond was silent for a long moment, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. It was the smile of a shark smelling blood in the water. Okay, Elijah, he said, picking up a pen and a fresh legal pad. Let us start acting what is your very first line. The next morning I woke up long before the sun peeked over the Georgia pines. The hot anger from the night before had cooled and settled, hardening into a cold, heavy and clear purpose. I picked up my phone. It was time to start the performance. It was time to become the broken man my daughter so desperately wanted me to be. I dialed her number. She answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep and heavy with impatience. Daddy, it is 6:30 in the morning. Is everything okay? She asked. I put a slight tremor in my voice, a hint of genuine-sounding confusion. Oh, is it? I asked. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I was just looking for the number for the lawn care service, the man who fixed the hedges out back. You do not happen to have it, do you? I heard a heavy, dramatic sigh on the other end of the line. Daddy, we have been over this, she said. I gave you his number last week. I wrote it on the list for you. It is right there on the refrigerator. Oh, right. The list, of course, I said. I paused just long enough to sound lost. Silly me, I must have forgotten. So you will be over for lunch today at noon. Daddy, what are you talking about? Her voice was sharp now, the impatience turning into open irritation. It is Monday. Our lunch day is Friday. Are you feeling all right? Oh, Friday, yes, of course, I said. Just tired, my mistake. I hung up the phone. I sat in my quiet kitchen, sipping my black coffee and watching the clock on the wall. I gave it exactly 1 hour. At 7:30 on the dot, I called her again. This time she answered immediately. Daddy, the irritation was completely undisguised. Jada! Honey, thank goodness, I said, injecting a rising panic into my voice. I'm so sorry to bother you again, but I cannot seem to find the lawn care number anywhere. Do you have it? There was a long, dead silence on the line. It stretched for 5 seconds, and then 10. I could hear the gears turning in her head. I could practically hear her processing this new delicious piece of evidence. This was not just a simple mistake. This was a pattern. When she finally spoke, all the irritation was completely gone. It was replaced by that sickly, sweet, condescending voice, the exact one she had used at dinner. Oh, Daddy, she cooed like she was talking to a helpless toddler. We just talked about this an hour ago, remember? The number is on the fridge. Oh, I said, making my voice shake. Oh dear, I do not remember calling you Jada. I do not remember that conversation at all. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I must be more tired than I thought. It is okay, Daddy, she said. The word daddy hit me again like a physical slap. It is okay. You just rest. Maybe I should come over later, to help you organize things. Oh, would you? I said that would be wonderful. I hung up the phone. The bait was successfully set. My next call was to Desmond. She is on her way, I said, skipping all the pleasantries. She thinks I'm losing my mind. Now about the cameras. I was just about to call you, Desmond said. I'm sending over a private security consultant, a man I have used for decades. He is discreet. No, I said. Cancel him right now. I'm a structural engineer, Desmond. I spent my entire life working with blueprints and highly sensitive equipment. I can install a few cameras myself. What I need from you is the law. I know Georgia is a one-party consent state for recording phone calls, but I need to know the rules about hidden video inside my own house. Elijah, this is the most important part, Desmond said, his voice dropping to a serious legal tone. You have an alarm system, correct, with signs posted outside? Yes, I said. On the front lawn and on the windows. Perfect. That is our first layer of implied consent, Desmond explained. But here is the real concrete legal footing. There is absolutely no reasonable expectation of privacy when someone is in your home for the purpose of committing a crime. Attempting to defraud an elderly person, conspiring to file a fraudulent conservatorship that is a serious felony in Georgia. The recordings will be fully admissible. Just make sure the audio is crystal clear. That will not be a problem, I said. I did not go to a standard big box store. I drove to a specialty electronics supplier over in the industrial district of Atlanta. I did not buy a prepackaged nanny camera. I bought high-end components. 3 high-definition wide-angle lenses no bigger than a quarter. I bought 3 high-sensitivity audio capture devices and a secure terabyte capacity server that would upload every single second of footage to an encrypted cloud that only Desmond and I had the password to. I am a precise man. I spent the next 3 hours working. I placed the first lens in the bookshelf in my study, nestled perfectly next to my old engineering textbooks. It had a perfect, unobstructed view of my desk and the guest chair. I placed the second lens in the living room, concealed deep in the dark wood of the fireplace mantel, aimed directly at the armchair Jada always chose. The third I placed in the entryway, high in a shadow, giving a master view of anyone coming or going. By 2 in the afternoon, I was completely finished. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I saw my empty living room. I saw my empty office. I heard the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The audio was so incredibly sensitive, I could hear a car pass by on the wet street outside. My house was no longer a home, it was a stage, and the cameras were rolling. I played the part of the confused old man for the next 7 days. I was a masterclass in decline. I called Jada on Wednesday to ask what day it was. I forgot to turn off the stove on Thursday, setting off the smoke alarm just long enough for the private security company to call her in an absolute panic. I let her help me pay my bills online, watching closely as she accidentally typed in her own email address as the recovery contact for my primary bank account. She was so patient, so sickeningly condescending, and so incredibly greedy. The following Tuesday she called me. Not me calling her, but her checking in. "Hi, Daddy," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "How are you feeling today? You sound a little less foggy." "Oh, much better, sweetheart," I said, making my voice sound weak. "Just a little tired." "Well, that is good," she said. "Listen, I have to be in your neighborhood anyway, so I thought I would drop by. And I have those simple tax forms. We talked about the ones to let Trey and me help you manage things, just to make the bills easier for you." My heart hammered in my chest, a steady, heavy beat. This was it. The cameras were on. The server was recording every single second. "Oh," I said, injecting the perfect amount of weary resignation into my tone. "That sounds fine, dear. That sounds very simple." Exactly 1 hour later, her white luxury SUV pulled into my driveway. She walked through my front door, carrying a designer handbag and a heavy leather folio. She kissed the air near my cheek and sat right in the living room, right in the armchair, right in the absolute kill zone of the fireplace camera. "You are looking better, Daddy," she said, smiling at me. "Jada," I said, playing my part perfectly. "You look just like your mother." It was a test, a cruel one, but I had to see her reaction. Her smile did not waver at all. It did not even reach her cold eyes. "Thank you, Daddy, that is very sweet," she said. She unzipped the leather folio and pulled out a thick stack of legal papers held together by a heavy black binder clip. "Now," she said in that same sickeningly sweet voice, "this is nothing to worry about. It is just some simple tax forms, standard government stuff. It just lets me and Trey talk to your accountant, handle the complicated bills, simplify things for your retirement." She placed the thick stack of papers on the glass coffee table in front of me. The high-definition lens in the fireplace had a perfect, unobstructed view. "There are just a few places you need to sign," she said. She fanned the papers out slightly but kept them neatly stacked. She pointed to the very last page. A yellow "Sign Here" sticker was affixed to the bottom corner. "Right here, Daddy," she said. And exactly as she said it, her left thumb, with its perfectly manicured red nail, pressed down firmly on the top of the page. It was not a casual placement. It was a deliberate, highly calculated move. Her thumb landed precisely covering the actual title of the document. I squinted my eyes, leaning forward. "Oh my, so many legal words," I said. "What does that say up at the top?" Her smile tightened just a fraction of an inch. "It is nothing, Daddy," she said smoothly. "Just legal jargon authorization for taxpayer. It is totally standard." The lens in the fireplace was capturing every single frame. Her thumb covering the true title, her blatant spoken lie, the entire felony in progress. I picked up the heavy gold pen. My hand shook just a little bit. I accidentally bumped the stack of papers as I reached for the pen, knocking them just enough to shift the alignment. For one perfect, clear as day second, her thumb slipped and the camera saw it all. The bold all-caps letters printed clearly on the top of the page. Durable power of attorney. Jada let out a sharp, highly irritated sigh. "Daddy, please be careful," she snapped. She quickly, forcefully realigned the stack of papers, her thumb slamming right back down on the title. "Just sign right here," she commanded. I took the gold pen, and with a shaky, totally confused hand, I signed my name. It was not my true signature, the firm script of a structural engineer. It was the messy signature of the victim she desperately wanted me to be. She snatched the paper back before the black ink was even fully dry. A look of profound relief and absolute triumph washed over her face. She thought she had it. She thought she had won the war. She gathered her things quickly. "See, all done," she said, standing up like a conquering hero. "So simple. I will take care of everything now, Daddy. You do not have to worry about a single thing." "Oh, thank you, Jada," I said, looking up at her from the sofa. "What would I ever do without you?" She smiled, kissed the empty air again, and walked out the door. I sat in my chair for a full minute, long after I heard her car pull away. Then I walked slowly into my office, opened my secure laptop, and rewound the encrypted footage. I zoomed in tightly. Her face, her spoken lies, her red thumb, and the hidden title, Durable Power of Attorney. I saved the digital file securely. I named it Exhibit A. Desmond was right. This was not just a betrayal of family. This was a serious felony, and I had just become the star witness for the prosecution. She thought she had the keys to the kingdom, but she had just locked herself in a cage. After she left with the signed document, the house went completely quiet. But the game had just escalated to an entirely new level. She had her fraudulent proof of my cooperation. Now she needed the medical proof to back up her lies in a court of law. The phone call came exactly 4 days later. I had spent that time continuing my carefully crafted performance, letting my supposed confusion ebb and flow like the ocean tide. I was waiting specifically for this exact call to happen. "Hi, Daddy," Jada said. Her voice was much lighter today, almost breezy, the exact sound of a predator that had just cornered its injured prey. "How are you feeling today?" "Oh, Jada," I said, letting a heavy, weary sigh carry through the phone line. "I am a bit tired, dear." These old bones of mine, they just ache from the weather. I know, Daddy, and that is exactly why I've been thinking, she said. The highly practiced, concerned daughter voice was back in full force. You know I have a friend, a wonderful man, Dr. Vance. He is a specialist in senior health. He helps people, stay sharp and manage their daily energy. Dr. Vance, the hired gun. My heart beat a steady, cold rhythm in my chest. The hidden cameras in my office were actively listening, recording my end of this highly incriminating conversation. A doctor, I said, injecting a strong note of suspicion into my tone. Jada, my regular doctor, says I am as fit as a fiddle. I do not need to see another doctor right now. Oh, no, Daddy, she laughed. It was a light, airy sound that was completely and utterly false. He is not that kind of clinical doctor. He does not poke or prod you with needles. He is a friend of mine. He just talks to you. He is a fascinating man. He has helped so many of my friends' parents. He's actually going to be in your neighborhood next week on Thursday, and I thought it would be lovely if he just stopped by the house for a chat, just a simple, friendly chat as a personal favor to me. There it was, the final deadly trap. She was not going to file a formal motion to compel me to see a court-appointed psychiatrist. That would be far too confrontational. That would give Desmond, my lawyer, a chance to fight it openly in front of a judge. No, she was going to bring the medical assassin right to my front door under the clever guise of a friendly house call. She would get his informal evaluation, his rubber-stamped diagnostic report, and then file it with the court, blindsiding me completely. It was a smarter, far more insidious move than I had ever expected from her. I do not know, Jada, I said, playing the part of the highly reluctant old man. I'm really not much for chatting with strangers in my home. Please, Daddy, she cooed through the phone. Do it for me. It would make me feel so much better just to know you are talking to the very best people. He is a friend. It is just a simple conversation over coffee. What could it possibly hurt? What could it hurt? I let the silence stretch out over the line. I let her think she was actively convincing me. I let her think I was a weak, pliable old man who could be easily pressured by his daughter. Oh, all right, dear, I said with a heavy sigh of absolute defeat. If it will make you happy, what time is he coming? Oh, thank you, Daddy, she gushed. The sheer triumph was actively thrumming in her voice. 10 in the morning on Thursday at 10. I will be there too, of course, just to make sure you are totally comfortable. You will not have to do a single thing. We will just talk. All right, dear, I said. Thursday at 10. You are the absolute best, Daddy. I will see you then. She hung up the phone. I sat in my leather chair for a full, quiet minute. The trap was not hers anymore. The trap was officially mine. She had just confirmed the specific time, the date, and the guest list for her very own execution. I picked up the phone and I dialed Desmond. He answered on the very first ring. Desmond, I said, my voice perfectly clear. All traces of the confused, weary old man were completely gone. It is on Thursday at 10 in the morning. The hired gun is coming to the house. Excellent, Desmond said, his voice coming back just as cold and precise. This was the moment where the structural integrity of my family finally collapsed into dust. I looked around my quiet study at the heavy drafting table where I designed massive bridges at the framed photos of Coretta smiling at me, and I felt a profound sense of closure. The grief of losing my daughter to her own greed was officially over. Now there was only the impending demolition. I told Desmond every detail of the phone call. I told him how she pitched Dr. Vance as a friend, how she used the word chat to disguise a psychological evaluation. They are moving exactly as you predicted, I told him. They think they are walking into a totally unsecured building. Let them think that, Desmond replied, the deep satisfaction evident in his voice. You just keep playing the part, Elijah. You let her walk that doctor right into your living room. We have the cameras perfectly positioned. We have the audio completely dialed in. I know I said. I agreed to her little plan, and my verbal consent was the very first click of the trap snapping shut. Jada thinks she is setting me up, but she is really just digging her own grave and bringing the shovel directly to my house. And our counter-expert Desmond continued over the phone. He is already fully confirmed. "Who did you get?" I asked, leaning back in my heavy chair. "I did not just get a doctor, Elijah." Desmond said, a note of deep respect echoing in his voice. "I got a judge, a jury, and an executioner for the medical field. I got Dr. Sterling. He is the chief of geriatric psychiatry at Emory University Hospital, right here in Atlanta." "I have never heard of him," I admitted. "You do not want to hear of him unless you absolutely need him," Desmond explained carefully. "He is the most respected and frankly the most feared expert witness in the entire state of Georgia. He does not testify for a quick paycheck. He does not need the money. He only testifies when he is professionally outraged. I sent him the preliminary legal filings from Jada, and I told him about the direct involvement of Dr. Vance. Sterling despises Vance. He views him as a total disgrace to the medical profession." "So he is willing to see me?" I asked. "He is willing to do a lot more than just see you," Desmond said. "He is arriving at your house tomorrow on Wednesday at exactly 9 in the morning. That is a full 24 hours before Jada and her fraud step foot on your property. We are going to have a full, independent, and absolutely pristine medical evaluation securely locked in the bank before Vance even opens his mouth." "That is brilliant," I said, feeling the solid ground of a good deeds forming beneath my feet. "It gets better," Desmond added. "Dr. Sterling knows exactly what Vance is going to look for. He knows the cheap tricks, the leading questions, the completely bogus interpretations of normal aging. Sterling is going to administer the most rigorous, exhaustive cognitive test available. By the time he is done with you, you will have a medical shield made of solid titanium." I hung up the phone with Desmond, and I felt a deep, abiding sense of peace. The anxiety that had been gnawing at my stomach for the past 2 weeks was completely gone. I was an engineer, and I finally had my blueprints. I spent the rest of that Tuesday afternoon preparing my house for the arrival of true medical authority. I cleaned the study. I made sure the hidden cameras were fully charged and perfectly connected to the secure server. I wanted a perfect high-definition record of Dr. Sterling conducting his legitimate test so that I could contrast it directly with the absolute circus Jada was bringing on Thursday. That night I sat alone in my dark living room. I looked at the empty armchair where Jada had sat when she tricked me into signing that power of attorney document. I thought about the sheer audacity of a child trying to steal the foundation right from under her own father. Coretta and I had worked so hard to give Jada everything she ever wanted. We had shielded her from the struggles, from the late nights, from the heavy burden of building wealth from scratch. And in doing so, we had accidentally raised a person who completely lacked the character required to actually respect that wealth. I poured myself a small glass of bourbon, the good stuff this time. I raised the glass to the empty room, offering a silent toast to Coretta. "I am fixing it, baby," I whispered to the quiet house. "I'm protecting what we built together." I slept deeply that night. It was the dreamless, heavy sleep of a man who knows exactly what he has to do the next day. I woke up at dawn on Wednesday morning. The Atlanta sky was a clear, crisp blue. The rain from the previous week had finally cleared out, leaving the air feeling fresh and clean. I drank my black coffee and I waited patiently. At exactly 8:55 in the morning, a dark, sensible sedan pulled into my driveway. I watched through the front window as a tall, distinguished African-American man stepped out of the car. He had silver hair cropped close to his head, and he wore a sharp, conservative gray suit. He carried a heavy, battered leather briefcase that looked like it had seen decades of serious academic work. He did not look around the property. He walked with absolute, undeniable purpose directly to my front door. This was not a friendly social call. This was the counter move. This was Dr. Sterling arriving to properly arm the trap. I opened the front door right as he raised his hand to ring the bell. He looked at me, his dark eyes sharp, highly intelligent and completely unreadable. "Elijah," he asked, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that commanded immediate respect. "Yes, doctor," I said, stepping back to let him inside the house. "Thank you for coming today. Desmond has prepaid my consultation fee," Dr. Sterling said, stepping into the foyer and wiping his shoes carefully on the mat. "I am here purely as an independent clinician. I am not here as your friend, and I am not here as your legal advocate. I am here to find the objective medical truth, whatever that truth may be. If I find that you are suffering from cognitive decline, my official report will reflect exactly that. Are we absolutely clear on the terms of this evaluation?" "Perfectly clear, doctor," I said, gesturing toward the hallway. "I'm a structural engineer. I completely respect objective data. I do not want special favors, I just want the truth," good Dr. Sterling said, offering a curt, highly professional nod. "I understand we have a very limited time frame before your daughter brings her own associate to this house. We have a lot of ground to cover this morning. Shall we begin the evaluation in your study?" "Right this way," I said. I led him down the hall, knowing the hidden cameras were capturing every second of this legitimate, serious medical interaction. The real test was finally about to begin. We walked into my study and I closed the heavy oak door behind us. The morning sun was streaming through the windows, catching the dust motes in the quiet air. I sat across from him in my leather chair and I waited. Dr. Sterling opened his battered briefcase and pulled out a thick, heavy binder. For the next 3 hours, he put me through the most rigorous, exhausting mental examination of my entire life. This was no friendly chat over coffee. This was a deep, clinical dive into the very architecture of my brain. "I'm going to conduct a full assessment, Elijah," he explained, his voice even and highly professional. "This will include a mini mental state examination, a clock drawing test, and a series of verbal recall and abstract reasoning questions. I will be very blunt with you. My official report will reflect exactly what I find here today. Is that completely understood?" "Perfectly, doctor," I said. "I am a builder. I rely on solid facts." He began immediately. "I'm going to give you 3 simple words," he said. "I want you to remember them because we will come back to them later. Apple table penny." He asked me the exact date, the current year, the season, the specific building we were sitting in, the city, and the state. They were simple questions designed to establish a firm baseline of reality. Then he leaned forward, resting his arms on my desk. "Can you count backward from 100 by 7s?" he asked. I did not even blink. 93, 86, 79, 72, 65. I finished the entire numerical sequence without pausing for a single breath. Mathematics was my very first language. He made a quiet note on his legal pad. "Now what were those 3 words I asked you to remember?" he asked. "Apple table penny," I answered immediately. He moved right along, wasting absolutely no time. He showed me a complex geometric shape printed on a laminated card and asked me to replicate it on a blank piece of paper. I am a man who spent his entire life drawing complicated blueprints. I took the pen and I drew the shape perfectly to scale, even noting the specific degrees of the angles. He looked at my drawing for a long moment, his face completely impassive. "You are a structural engineer, I'm told," he said. I confirmed. "I designed the massive steel supports for the major highway expansions right here in Atlanta. And you currently manage your own finances?" he asked. "I do," I said, leaning back in my chair. "My stock portfolio is up 9% year over year. That is 4 points above the standard market average. I just rebalanced my technology holdings in January, moving a significant portion of cash into stable government bonds and local utility companies. Dr. Sterling jotted more notes, his pen scratching loudly in the silent room. "And your hobbies, Elijah?" he asked. "I build scale models," I said. "I just finished a 1/12 scale replica of the childhood home I shared with my late wife, Coretta. It is all hardwood ash and maple. It required over 2,000 individual hand-cut wooden pieces." He looked up from his notes, his dark, intelligent eyes locking onto mine. "Elijah, are you currently operating under any unusual stresses?" he asked. I met his gaze directly, and I did not look away. "Doctor, my own daughter is actively attempting to have me declared legally incompetent so she can steal my $4 million estate to pay for the catastrophic crypto gambling debts of her husband. Is that what you mean by unusual stress?" A small, thin smile finally touched his serious lips. "Yes," he said quietly. "That would certainly qualify as unusual stress." He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper from his binder. "This is the official mini mental state examination," he said. "It is a 30-point scale. Anything above a 24 is considered completely normal, healthy cognitive function." He administered the final written test. The questions were almost insultingly simple. "What is this?" he asked, pointing to his silver watch. "What is this?" he asked, holding up his black pen. "Repeat this specific phrase exactly after me, no ifs, ands, or buts." When we were finally finished, he tallied the final numerical score at the very bottom of the page. He clicked his pen, signed his name with a heavy flourish, and dated the legal document. He looked across the desk at me, and for the very first time all morning, his stern, professional demeanor completely softened. "Elijah," he said, his voice filled with quiet, absolute respect. "In my 30 years of medical practice, I have rarely, if ever, seen a mind like yours." He turned the paper around and slid it across the heavy desk for me to see clearly. "Your score on the mini mental state examination is exactly 30 out of 30, he said. "A completely perfect score. Your abstract reasoning is currently testing in the 99th percentile. Your verbal recall is utterly flawless." He stood up from the guest chair and began packing his heavy briefcase. "I will have a full 13-page notarized medical report sitting directly on the desk of your lawyer, Desmond, by 4:00 this afternoon. It will state unequivocally that you are not only completely competent, but that you possess a cognitive function significantly sharper than most men half your age." He snapped the leather briefcase shut. "It will also explicitly note," he added, his voice hardening again, "that you are currently operating under extreme duress from a clear and present familial financial threat." He handed me his heavy cardstock business card. "Dr. Vance is an absolute charlatan," Dr. Sterling said, his voice suddenly cold with righteous professional fury. "I know his sloppy work. I know exactly how he twists the basic facts to fit a narrative. If he dares to present a contrary medical finding in a court of law, I will personally be there to see him stripped of his medical credentials." "You have a very good day, Elijah." I stood at my front window and watched him get into his sensible sedan and drive away down the street. It was exactly 12 noon on Wednesday. Tomorrow morning, the hired gun was walking right into a spinning buzzsaw. I had my official baseline. I had the absolute medical truth legally notarized, dated, and signed by the most unimpeachable source in the entire state of Georgia. The trap was no longer just set. It was fully armed and completely ready to snap shut. At exactly 9:58 in the morning on Thursday, the front doorbell rang loudly through the house. I was sitting at my heavy desk in the study watching the live feed from the hidden cameras on my secure laptop screen. I watched my daughter Jada standing on my front porch. She was smiling, but her eyes were darting around the quiet suburban street, checking to see if anyone was watching her. Standing right beside her was a man in an impeccably tailored, absurdly expensive-looking suit. He was tall with slick-back silver hair, a deep artificial tan, and a smile that was all bright white teeth. He looked much more like a smooth-talking game show host than a serious medical professional. This had to be Dr. Vance, the hired gun from Atlanta. Jada did not wait for me to answer the heavy wooden door. She used her own brass key to open the lock. The hidden camera in the entryway captured her nodding to him before she pushed the door wide open. She just walked right in, acting like she already owned the place. "Daddy," she called out, her voice echoing loudly in the hallway. "We are here." I stood up from my desk and walked out of my study, moving slowly and highly intentionally. I was no longer the sharp, precise engineer. Today I was the aggrieved, deeply confused old man. The cameras in the living room and the study were silently rolling, capturing every single movement, and especially the crystal clear audio. "Jada," I said, making my voice sound flat and a little lost. I nodded at the slick man standing next to her. "This must be your friend from the city." "This is Dr. Vance," she gushed, acting incredibly polite. "Doctor, this is my father, Elijah." Dr. Vance stepped forward smoothly and offered his hand to me. His skin was soft, perfectly manicured, and his grip was surprisingly weak. "Elijah," he said, his voice a smooth, highly practiced baritone. "A genuine pleasure to meet you, sir. Thank you so much for welcoming me into your beautiful home today." "He's just here for a simple chat, Daddy," Jada said, gently guiding him toward the living room, right toward the heavy armchair. "Just a friendly conversation." They sat down together. I sat exactly opposite them on the edge of the sofa. The hidden camera on the fireplace mantel had a perfect high-definition view of all three of us. Jada perched on the very edge of her seat, a picture-perfect image of the concerned, beautiful daughter. Dr. Vance crossed his expensive legs, pulled a small leather-bound notebook from his suit jacket, and smiled widely at me. "So, Elijah," he began, his tone condescendingly warm, "Jada tells me you are a retired structural engineer. That is absolutely fascinating. You must have built some incredible things in your time." "I built things that stand up to massive pressure, Doctor," I said, staring right at him. "Wonderful," he said, making a small, quick note in his little book. "Jada also mentioned to me that you've been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately. A bit, shall we say, confused about your daily routine." It was the very first question, the first loaded, highly leading gaslighting question. I looked right at him, and I absolutely did not smile. "Doctor," I said, my voice turning cold and precise, "I do not feel confused at all. I feel incredibly angry." The fake smile on the face of Dr. Vance did not waver, but his dark eyes sharpened slightly. "Angry?" he asked softly. "What exactly are you angry about, Elijah?" "I am angry about betrayal," I said, leaning forward just a fraction of an inch. "I'm angry about deep family ingratitude. To answer your original question, I'm never confused. The only time I feel a flicker of confusion is when I am forced to deal with blatant, naked treachery." "Does that specifically answer your question?" Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the face of Jada completely tighten. This was not the foggy, compliant old man she was expecting to present. Dr. Vance just chuckled lightly as if I had told a charming, eccentric joke. "A fiery spirit," he said smoothly. "I really like that." He made another quick note in his book. "Let us try something much simpler just to get a comfortable baseline. What exact day is it today, Elijah?" I stared at him, letting a heavy silence fill the room. "It is Thursday," I said slowly. "The time is exactly 10:14 in the morning. You were exactly 14 minutes late for the 10 o'clock appointment my daughter scheduled without my proper consent. You are currently sitting in my private home in Atlanta, Georgia. Would you like me to recite the zip code as well?" The smile on his face twitched. He looked over at Jada, silently asking for help. Jada jumped right in exactly as I knew she would. "See, doctor," she said, her voice full of highly practiced fake tears. "This is exactly what I mean. He is so agitated, so aggressive lately. He was never like this before. He is completely paranoid. He thinks everyone is late. He thinks everyone is secretly plotting against him." Dr. Vance nodded sagely at her, validating her lies, and then turned back to face me. "No one is plotting anything, Elijah," he said, his voice dropping into a tone like a liquid tranquilizer. "We are just here to help you. Your family is deeply worried about you. Do you often feel that your own family is secretly working against you?" This was the exact moment. The backstory drip. I let out a long, slow, heavy breath. I looked away from him, turning my head toward the fireplace mantel, where a beautiful framed picture of my late wife Coretta sat. My wife. I started letting my voice naturally crack just a little bit. Coretta. She's been gone for 5 long years, but right before she died, she told me something very important. We were having a terrible argument about Jada. I was giving Jada money for the big house, for everything she wanted, and Coretta, she begged me to stop doing it. I turned my head slowly back to Dr. Vance. His face was a perfect mask of clinical, highly paid interest. The hidden camera was recording every single micro-expression. Coretta told me. I continued, my voice thick with emotion. She said, "Elijah, you have to see it clearly. Jada loves your money much more than she loves you." I was absolutely furious, I admitted, letting the real raw memory of that painful fight fill my voice. I told Coretta she was completely wrong. I told her not to ever say that about our only child. I yelled at my dying wife. It was one of the very last real conversations we ever had, and I spent it yelling at her. I let the heavy silence sit in the room for a moment. And now I said, looking right into the dark soul of Dr. Vance. Now I find myself sitting in a chat with a total stranger in my own living room. A man my own daughter hired to see if I am confused enough to be put away. "So you ask me if I feel my family is against me?" "No, doctor. I feel that my wife Coretta was a very smart prophet and I should have listened to her warnings. I watched Dr. Vance write furiously in his little book. I knew exactly what lies he was writing down. Delusions of persecution, fixation on family betrayal, paranoid ideation, severe agitation. He was getting absolutely everything he was paid to find. He finally closed his notebook with a soft snap. "Elijah, thank you so much for being so candid with me," he said smoothly. "I'm going to ask you to do one very simple thing for me now. A little brain teaser, if you will. It is something we do with all of our clients. It is called a clock drawing test." He pulled a blank, unlined sheet of white paper from his folio and a silver pen. "I would like you to draw a round clock face for me," he instructed. "Put in all the numbers and then set the hands to, let us say, 10 minutes past 11. He slid the blank paper and the pen across the glass coffee table. Jada watched me closely, her expression tight with eager anticipation. This was it. The absolute classic test for severe dementia. The exact test she was so sure I would fail. I picked up the silver pen. I took the blank sheet of white paper. I looked at it for a long moment. "Just a clock," I asked, my voice calm and perfectly level. "Any clock you like, Elijah." Dr. Vance said, his smile returning. "Just draw a simple clock." "All right," I said. "I am an engineer. I am a man who spent his entire life building things from scratch. I did not just draw a simple shaky circle. I reached across the glass table and I took the small leather-bound notebook he had just used. I placed it flat on the paper and I used its perfect 90-degree corner as a straight edge. I drew a perfect intersecting vertical and horizontal axis right in the center of the page. Then I took a round, smooth wooden drink coaster from the side table. I placed its exact center on my axis, and I traced a perfect, sharp circle. "Daddy, what are you doing?" Jada started, her voice rising in sudden panic. "Hush," Dr. Vance said, holding up a manicured hand. His eyes were wide, fascinated by the complete deviation from his expected script. I placed the 12 at the very top, the 6 at the absolute bottom, the 3 and the 9 on the horizontal axis. Then, with the meticulous precision of a master draftsman, I filled in the remaining numbers using the cross lines to ensure they were perfectly spaced and beautifully symmetrical. "He asked for 10 minutes past 11, I murmured quietly to myself. I drew the minute hand long and sharp, pointing precisely at the 2. And I drew the hour hand shorter, thicker, and not pointing directly at the 11, but exactly 1/6 of the way past the 11 on its slow journey to the 12. I added the small, delicate second hand, and then I simply could not help myself. It was a final, cold flourish of absolute defiance. I started to draw inside the clock face. "Elijah, what is that?" Dr. Vance asked, leaning forward on the sofa, his professional mask slipping. I drew the mainspring. I drew the escape wheel. I drew the complicated pallet fork. I drew a perfect, mathematically sound schematic diagram of the internal escapement mechanism of a mechanical clock. I put the silver pen down on the glass. I slid the paper back across the coffee table toward the doctor. There was a long, heavy silence in my living room. Jada was staring at the drawing, her mouth hanging slightly open, a look of profound, terrified confusion washing over her face. Dr. Vance just stared at it. He had been fully expecting the shaky, disorganized number, jumbled drawing of a severe dementia patient. He got an architectural blueprint. He cleared his throat loudly. He looked up at me. His warm, professional smile was completely gone. It was replaced by a tight, thin-lipped expression of deep annoyance. This was absolutely not in the script he was paid to follow. "Well," he said, forcing a dry chuckle, "that is certainly the most thorough pen and ink clock I have ever seen in my practice." He quickly folded his paper and shoved it into his suit jacket. He stood up from the sofa. "Thank you for your valuable time today, Elijah. This has been highly illuminating." "Doctor, he has always been deeply obsessive," Jada said, scrambling to her feet, desperately trying to salvage her false narrative. "See, he gets completely stuck on tiny details. It is not normal behavior, Doctor." "Yes," Dr. Vance said, grabbing his expensive briefcase. "I have absolutely everything I need here." He was out the front door in less than 30 seconds. Jada followed right behind him, but she stopped in the entryway. She threw one last, incredibly venomous look back at me. It was a look that screamed, "You think you are smart, old man. You just wait and see." The heavy front door slammed shut, leaving my house in a profound, ringing silence. I sat in the quiet of my living room for a few minutes. I listened to the ticking of my real grandfather clock in the hall. Then I stood up, walked into my study, and opened my secure laptop. I stopped the recording on the hidden server. I watched the digital file save the little blue progress bar creeping across the screen. 2 hours of high-definition video and crystal-clear audio. I officially named the file Exhibit B, and I uploaded it immediately to the encrypted cloud folder I shared with Desmond. Dr. Vance was a highly paid liar. He was going to sit down and write a medical report filled with severe agitation and clinical paranoia and obsessive-compulsive tendencies. But I had a weapon he did not know about. I had the absolute truth. I had the perfect score from Dr. Sterling. And now I had a 2-hour high-definition video of the sham test itself. Let him write his fraudulent report. Let him lie to the court. I had the tape, and that tape would be his total undoing. My cell phone rang buzzing loudly on the heavy wooden desk, startling me out of my thoughts. It was Desmond. I had been just about to call him. "I have the recording," I said, answering the phone and skipping the standard hello. "Forget the recording for a second," Elijah Desmond said. His voice was incredibly sharp, all business. I was just about to call you. They actually did it. They officially filed the paperwork with the court. A sudden coldness gripped my chest. What do you mean? I asked. I thought that is what the visit from Vance was for, to get the medical evidence to finally file. That is exactly what a normal, rational person would do, Desmond said, his voice tight with rising anger. Jada and her lawyer just filed the full legal petition for an emergency conservatorship with the sworn, signed declaration from Dr. Vance attached to it. The one he must have written before he even met you this morning. They just used the visit to your house as a quick rubber stamp. They filed it. I repeated the bitter words, tasting like poison. Yes, Desmond confirmed. And the Fulton County Court has unfortunately granted an emergency hearing based solely on that fraudulent report. Elijah, the hearing is next week, exactly 7 days from right now. They are moving at absolute lightning speed. I sat down heavily in my chair, my legs suddenly feeling weak. 7 days. But Elijah, Desmond continued, his voice dropping an octave, that is not the strange part of this. I've seen these emergency petitions before in my career. They are usually all about protecting frozen assets. But there is something in this specific filing that I've never seen before. It is incredibly aggressive. What is it, Desmond? I asked, bracing myself. They are not just asking for the legal right to manage your finances. They are not just asking to take over your private medical decisions. They have specifically petitioned the judge for the immediate emergency right to sell your house. I gripped the edge of my heavy oak desk. Sell my house, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. But why Desmond? This house is completely paid for. It is my home. It is worth over $1.5 million in this market. Why would they ever need to sell it immediately? It makes absolutely no logical sense. There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. That is the exact question, Elijah, Desmond said, his voice grim. That is the $1 million question that we have to answer right now. They are not just greedy, they are absolutely desperate. And they need a massive amount of cash incredibly fast. We have 7 days to find out exactly why. Sell my home. The words echoed in my quiet study long after I hung up the phone with Desmond. It was a massive tactical error, a complete blunder. Why petition a judge for something so extreme? It was the desperate act of a cornered animal, a wild move born not of careful strategy, but of sheer blind panic. My house was the only real home I had known for 40 years. It was where Coretta and I had raised Jada. It was where my wife had taken her final breath. The sickening thought of strangers walking through her beautiful rose garden, of Trey tracking his muddy shoes across my clean workshop floor, it made my stomach turn. A new, much colder anger settled deep into my bones. They are desperate, Desmond had told me. We have 7 days to find out why. Desmond did not just mean we, he meant his team. I was the bait, the careful actor on the stage. He was the relentless hunter. He called me exactly 2 days later. It was a Saturday morning. I was out in my workshop trying to steady my restless hands by sanding a piece of solid maple. I found it, Elijah, he said over the phone. He did not sound triumphant. He sounded completely disgusted. Found what I asked, turning off the loud sander. The sudden silence of the workshop was incredibly heavy. The exact reason, the massive why, the true motivation for the emergency petition, Desmond said. The specific reason they need to liquidate your house right now. Go on, I told him, wiping the fine sawdust from my hands. I have been a lawyer in Atlanta for 35 years, Desmond said, his voice tight with anger. I have seen intense greed. I have seen pure malice. I have seen profound stupidity. But Elijah, this is a very special, highly toxic combination. They are not just greedy. They are complete idiots. He let out a long, heavy breath over the line. I was looking at the debt, the $500,000 hole from the crypto scam of Trey, the maxed out credit cards, but that is old debt. That is a slow, smoldering burn. This new thing is a raging fire. I had my private investigator, the very best in the entire city, run a deep check on new big ticket purchases. Boats, private planes, luxury cars. I was looking for a $100,000 Mercedes, maybe? He paused, letting the tension build. Elijah, what does a fool like Trey buy when he desperately wants to feel like a big shot? What does he buy to impress his fake friends? Something loud. I said something incredibly stupid. He bought a yacht, Desmond said. A 92-foot Italian-made luxury motor yacht. He officially signed the binding purchase agreement at a major boat show exactly 3 weeks ago. He has been loudly bragging to the yacht broker that he is about to come into a massive family inheritance. I sank down heavily onto my wooden workbench, the familiar smell of sawdust and wood glue suddenly making me feel violently sick. A yacht, I whispered. Not just a yacht, Elijah. Desmond continued, his voice dropping to a deadly serious tone. He paid a $200,000 non-refundable cash deposit 3 weeks ago. I will bet my legal license it was the very last of the money from the second mortgage on their Buckhead mansion. My God, that is not even the why, Elijah. This is the real why. The purchase agreement legally states that the final remaining balance is due immediately upon delivery, and the delivery date is in exactly 10 days. The final balance, Elijah, is $1.5 million. The entire workshop spun around me. The numbers clicked perfectly into place in my engineering brain with a sickening, flawless logic. $1.5 million, I repeated slowly. Exactly, Desmond said. The exact low-ball quick sale value of your home. If Trey defaults on that massive final payment, he does not just lose the fancy boat. He permanently forfeits the $200,000 deposit. It is entirely gone. Vanished. Another catastrophic, completely unexplainable financial loss that he simply cannot hide from Jada. It all became crystal clear. The sudden emergency petition, the frantic rush, the desperate, insane legal request to sell my house. They were not trying to protect my assets. They were not just trying to cover their daily debts. They are trying to liquidate my home, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so cold it actually burned my throat. To pay for a toy. That is exactly it, Desmond confirmed. They are not trying to slowly bleed your money. They have already spent your money. They are just frantically trying to cover the massive check. They have 10 days before the check completely bounces. The court hearing is in exactly 5 days. I stood up from my workbench. The lingering fog of family confusion was completely gone. The deep hurt of betrayal was gone. All that was left in my soul was the cold, hard, structural certainty of the fight to come. They are not just greedy, I said to Desmond. And they are not just stupid. They are totally cornered, and they have graciously given us a hard deadline. Thank you, Desmond. I know exactly what I have to do now. I hung up the phone. They did not just want my money. They were actively trying to trade my life work, my cherished memories, the home I built with my wife for a luxury boat. This was no longer just a simple legal fight. This was an extermination. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of highly controlled, focused rage. The Fulton County court hearing was in 5 days. Desmond was meticulously preparing the legal side, filing our counter-motions, formally subpoenaing Dr. Sterling, and preparing Exhibit A and Exhibit B, the fraudulent power of attorney video and the recording of the sham evaluation. My assigned job was to actively prepare the past. Elijah, I need absolutely everything Desmond had ordered me. Every single tax return for the past 10 years, every medical record, every major purchase receipt. I'm going to build an impenetrable fortress of competence around you. I need the hard paper to prove it. So I sat quietly in my study, completely surrounded by dusty file boxes. It was a miserable, emotional, archaeological dig straight into my own life. I found the original bank receipts for the $200,000 down payment clearly marked as a gift in my own neat handwriting. I found the private school tuition checks for my grandson. I found decades of meticulous financial records, the very definition of a highly competent, highly organized mind. And then I found her. In the very back of the deep closet in my study, hidden under an old blanket, there was one last box. It was a simple cardboard banker's box labeled in her elegant sloping script. Coretta Personal. I had not opened this specific box since the week she died. My heart physically ached. It felt like a deep betrayal to open it now, especially for a reason as sordid as this legal fight, but Desmond had said he needed everything. I cut the old packing tape with a utility knife. The familiar smell of old paper and her faint, lingering scent of lavender rose up, hitting me like a gentle physical blow. Inside the box were things I had not seen in many years. Old love letters we wrote in college, photographs from our honeymoon in Charleston, the very first grade drawings from Jada. My rough hand brushed against a thick beige envelope that I did not recognize at all, tucked away at the very bottom. It had no label. It was just surprisingly heavy. I pulled it out slowly. It was not sealed. Inside there was no letter. There was no money. There was only a small, cold silver key. I dumped it carefully into my palm. It was a safe deposit box key. But that was not right at all. I looked at the small plastic tag securely attached to the metal ring. Our family safe deposit box was at our local Chase Bank branch, the one I had maintained for 30 years. The key sitting in my hand was completely different. The plastic tag was bright blue, not white, and the words printed on it made my blood run absolutely cold. Bank of America, Ballard Branch Box 312. I stared at it in the dim light. This was completely wrong. This was impossible. We did not use Bank of America. I had never, not once in my entire 47-year marriage, had a single account at Bank of America. Coretta handled the daily household bills, but I handled the major finances, the investments, the large estate. I knew exactly where all our money was. This was a secret. Coretta, my quiet, loving, fiercely supportive wife, had a secret safe deposit box. She had quietly opened it without ever telling me. She had intentionally hidden the key in a personal box she knew I would not open until long after she was gone. A strange electric feeling shot through my tired body, completely replacing the heavy exhaustion. It was not just grief. It was an intense curiosity. A powerful, urgent pulse. My wife was a master planner. She was meticulous with our lives. She balanced our checkbook down to the very last penny. She was never forgetful. She was never impulsive. If Coretta did something in absolute secret, she did it for a very specific reason. The emergency court hearing was in exactly 3 days. The massive yacht payment was officially due in 8 days. My entire world was actively falling apart. And suddenly my wife, 5 years gone, had just handed me a silver key. I looked at the small silver object sitting in my calloused hand. This was not just a key. It was a message from the grave. It was a critical piece of a complex puzzle that I did not even know existed. I closed my heavy hand around it. The cold metal bit sharply into my palm. I was not waiting for Desmond. I was not waiting for the emergency hearing. I was going to that specific bank. I had to know exactly what my wife had hidden from me. The Bank of America branch was 20 minutes away in a part of the city I rarely ever visited. I walked through the heavy glass doors, the small silver key feeling incredibly heavy and foreign in my pocket. My heart was hammering fiercely against my ribs. I felt like a criminal, an imposter walking right into my own life. I walked up to the polished service desk. A polite young woman looked up at me. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked politely. My voice was incredibly dry. "I need to access a private safe deposit box," I told her. "I have the specific key. The box is in the name of my late wife, Coretta." "Of course," she said. "Do you have your photo identification, and are you officially listed as a co-signer on the box?" "I do not know," I admitted, feeling like a complete fool. "She passed away exactly 5 years ago. I just found this key hidden in her files. I am the executor of her estate. I have her official death certificate, my identification, and our marriage certificate." The bank manager was quickly called over. I spent 30 agonizing minutes sitting in a glass-walled office, presenting my legal documents, actively proving who I am, and proving that Coretta was truly gone. The manager was very kind, but he was incredibly firm. Finally, he looked at the original signature card that Coretta had signed when she first opened the box. "Well, Elijah," he said slowly, "you're not actually listed as a co-signer on this account. However, your wife set this specific box up as a trust, not a joint marital account, and you are legally listed as the sole beneficiary with full access granted only upon presentation of her death certificate, which you have just provided to me. My wife had set up a legal trust entirely without me. A moment later, I was standing inside the secure vault. The air was incredibly cold, sterile, and perfectly silent. The bank attendant used her master key, and then she used mine. A long metal box number 312 slid out with a heavy metallic scraping sound. She placed it carefully on a table in a small private viewing room, and she closed the heavy door, leaving me completely alone. I stared at the metal box for a very long time. My old hands were visibly shaking. This was a secret part of Coretta that I had never known. A massive secret she had kept from me, her loyal husband of nearly 50 years. I lifted the heavy metal lid. I was expecting to find old jewelry, emergency cash, or hidden stock certificates, but the long box was nearly empty. There was absolutely no money. There were no jewels. There were no property deeds. There was only a single thick, cream-colored envelope. My name, Elijah, was written across the front in her incredibly familiar, elegant handwriting. I picked it up. It was heavy in my hand. I turned it over. The back was sealed tightly with a drop of red wax. I broke the seal with my thumb. Inside, there was no legal document. There was just a handwritten letter written on her personal heavy stationery. I unfolded the very first page. The date written in the top right corner made my breath completely catch in my throat. It was dated exactly 6 years ago. Just one single week after her terminal cancer diagnosis. 1 week after the best doctors in Atlanta told us she had at most a year to live. I began to read her careful words. "My dearest Elijah," the letter began. "If you are reading this letter, it means I am finally gone, and it means you have found this key. I am so deeply sorry, my love. I am so sorry for keeping this secret from you." My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I sat down in that sterile, silent bank vault room, and I unfolded the thick pages. The date was 6 years ago. It was the exact week the oncologist had sat us down in his cold office and told us the cancer had aggressively spread. I began to read again, her perfect handwriting swimming through my sudden tears. "I am writing this to you." I read my voice, a dry, echoing whisper in the small room. In the terrible week after the diagnosis, a week where I have felt absolutely nothing but pure terror, But I am the daughter of a smart accountant, Elijah, and you are a brilliant structural engineer. We are careful planners, and I have realized with a terrible cold clarity that I have to actively plan for two separate deaths. The death of my failing body from this disease and the potential death of our entire family from a disease I have seen growing for years. Pure greed. I stopped reading. I read that specific line again. The greed in our own family. Please, my love, do not be angry with me. The letter continued. You are a man of pure, uncomplicated, absolute goodness. You see the world exactly as it should be. You see our daughter Jada as the sweet little girl you taught to ride a bicycle, but I have always seen the world exactly as it is, and I see Jada exactly as she is. My breath caught sharply in my chest. It was the conversation. The exact terrible fight that I had confessed to Dr. Vance. I love Jada with every single part of my being, Coretta wrote, and I could physically feel her intense anguish in the written words. She is my only child. But she is absolutely not like you, Elijah. She has a deep, dark hole inside her. A massive hunger that is not really about money, but about what that money represents to her. Status, raw power, a thick shield against the real world. And her husband Trey, he is a complete fool, but he is a gasoline-soaked fool, and she is a fully lit match. And you, my love, you are the wooden house we built together. I put the letter down on the cold metal table, my hand covering my mouth. I felt violently sick. She had seen it all. She had seen the complete destruction years before I ever did. I picked the letter back up, needing to finish it. I knew that when I was finally gone, you would be incredibly vulnerable, she wrote. Your innate goodness, your deep love for her, your blinding grief. They would be the very weapons she would use against you. She would see your generosity as total weakness. She would see your hard-earned inheritance not as a precious gift to be cherished, but as a fund to be completely drained. She would, in the name of simply helping you, completely dismantle everything we built together. Helping. The exact word, her specific word, the very same one Jada had used, leaped right off the page at me. That terrible fight we had, I read on my vision blurring again. The one you will surely remember where I told you she loved your money and you yelled so loudly at me. My heart completely broke that day, Elijah. Not because you yelled at me, but because I realized you simply could not see the truth. You were willfully, completely blind, and I knew in that exact moment I would have to do this completely alone. I would have to betray your trust just this one time in order to save you for all time. So I have done something. Something incredibly drastic, something I hope is entirely permanent. I have taken drastic steps. I have built a fortress. I have done it completely without your name, without your knowledge, precisely. So that when this terrible day came, and I prayed to God it never would, you could stand in a courtroom and truthfully say I knew absolutely nothing. Then you would be in the eyes of the law truly and completely innocent. I read the words, and the sheer brilliance of my wife absolutely staggered me. I have done this to protect you, Elijah, to completely save you from our own child. She cannot touch you, my love. She cannot touch our beautiful home. She cannot touch our life work. I have legally seen to it. I'm so incredibly tired and I'm so scared, but not of dying. I'm scared of what she will do when she finds out, but I'm far more scared of what she will do to you if I do absolutely nothing. Do not be angry with me for this massive secret. Be free. I did this so you could live your life in peace in our home without any fear. This was my very final act of love, not for her, but for you. I love you much more than my own life. I love you more than the life I'm about to lose. Now please look at the other document in this envelope. I looked down. I thought the letter was absolutely everything, but my trembling fingers felt another thick, folded set of papers behind it. It was not a letter. It was a heavy legal document, and the bold title on the very top of the first page made my tired heart stop completely. My fingers went totally numb. I felt incredibly dizzy, totally disoriented, as if the cold, sterile walls of the bank vault were rapidly closing in on me. Behind the personal letter, just as Coretta had said, was another much thicker multi-page document. It was folded neatly in three. It was not personal stationery. It was thick, heavy legal bond paper. I unfolded it carefully. My eyes skipped rapidly over the dense legal jargon, the whereas, and the here and after, and landed squarely on the title centered at the top in bold, black, terrifying letters. Declaration of Trust for the family of Elijah and Coretta. Irrevocable Trust. I did not understand. A trust. I was the legally appointed executor of our simple estate. Our estate was incredibly simple. A joint checking account, a brokerage account, this house. Desmond and I had reviewed it all just a few short months ago. This massive legal thing was absolutely not part of it. I dropped my eyes back down to the letter from Coretta, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read the words. My love, she had continued on the very last page. That specific document you are currently holding is our absolute salvation, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. The week after my terrible diagnosis, I told you I was going to visit my sister in Savannah. To say goodbye. That was only half a lie. I did see my sister, but the real reason I went was to specifically see her lawyer. You remember my niece, Sasha. Her father, the husband of my sister, is not just a small-town lawyer. He is one of the top trust and estate specialists in the entire state of Georgia. I sat in his private office. Elijah and I told him absolutely everything. I told him all about Jada, about Trey, about my deepest fears, and I asked him to help me build a legal firewall. A legal fortress so high and so incredibly strong that not even our own daughter could ever burn it down. He called it an irrevocable trust. A legal lockbox, he called it. Over the next 6 months, my love, while I was going through brutal chemotherapy, while I was telling you, I was just rebalancing our checkbook. I was systematically and entirely legally moving absolutely everything we owned. I dropped the letter and violently grabbed the legal document, my eyes flying rapidly across the dense pages. It was all there. Complex schedules, legal addendums, detailed lists. The house. The letter from Coretta continued exactly as if she was speaking directly to me from the grave. Our home. I legally transferred the deed. It is no longer in the name of Elijah and Coretta. It is owned outright by the family Irrevocable Trust. My heart completely stopped. The house Jada was frantically trying to sell, the massive brokerage account. I read on. All of it. Every single stock, every bond, every mutual fund. I quietly liquidated our joint account. And using my full legal power as co-owner, I transferred the full cash balance directly into a new account in the name of the trust. Our retirement funds, absolutely everything. It is all locked inside the trust. I stumbled back, hitting the cold wall of the viewing room. $4 million. My entire net worth, my home, my life work. For the last 6 years, it had not actually been mine. And here is the absolute beauty of it, my love, she wrote, and I could feel the fierce, highly protective intelligence of the incredible woman I had married. Here is the true genius of the plan. You are what they legally call the lifetime beneficiary. That means you get all the income, the stock dividends, the bank interest. You will live comfortably in our house, rent-free for the rest of your natural life. Nothing will change for you. You will have your income, your home, your quiet life. You are completely protected. But, and that one single word, that one word was the absolute kill shot. But you are absolutely not the trustee. You are not the grantor. You do not control the actual principal. You cannot be bullied or tricked or forced by any court to sell the house. You simply do not have the legal power to do so. You cannot be unduly influenced into giving away the stocks because you do not personally own them. The trust owns them. You are legally a protected tenant in your very own life. I was rapidly reading, but I was absolutely not breathing. But if I am not the trustee, who is? The final words from Coretta on the page answered me clearly. A trust must have a trustee, my love, she wrote. A manager, someone to fiercely protect the assets from external attack. I knew it could not be me. I would be gone. I knew it could not be you. You were the one I was actively trying to protect, and it could not be Desmond. Jada knew him and would viciously fight him. I had to choose someone Jada would never see coming. Someone she would never suspect. Someone she held in such incredibly low regard she would not even think to look at her twice. I needed someone with unimpeachable moral character. Someone who truly loved us. Someone who was smart and meticulous and humble. Someone, Elijah, exactly like a nurse. I looked carefully at the signature page of the heavy trust document. Grantor Coretta beneficiary, Elijah, and there at the very bottom, successor trustee, Sasha. Sasha, my niece in Savannah, the daughter of my sister, the quiet, incredibly sweet girl who had become a dedicated oncology nurse, the exact one Jada always called the boring poor cousin, the one she had not even invited to her extravagant wedding because she said she was too dull. My wife, in her final, absolutely brilliant act of defiance, had made her the sole guardian of our entire $4 million estate. Jada was frantically filing for an emergency conservatorship to illegally sell a house that her cousin in Savannah already owned. My legs gave out completely. I sat down heavily on the small, hard chair in that cold, silent room, holding the precious letters from my wife. I was not crying from grief. I was crying from sheer, absolute awe. She had done it from her very grave. Coretta had just passed me the gun fully loaded, and the emergency court hearing was in exactly 3 days. 3 days later, the morning of the emergency hearing finally arrived. The Fulton County courtroom in downtown Atlanta was incredibly cold. It was a sterile, modern room filled with light oak wood and gray carpet, and it felt like the most openly hostile place on earth. I sat quietly at the defendant table right next to Desmond. I wore my absolute best dark suit, the exact one I had last worn to the funeral of my wife Coretta. It felt completely appropriate today. I was here to officially bury another part of my family. Across the wide center aisle on the petitioner side sat my daughter. Jada looked magnificent and incredibly dangerous. She was dressed in a severe dark blue designer suit, her hair pulled back tightly. She looked exactly like a grieving, highly responsible daughter who was being forced to make a terrible, heartbreaking choice. Beside her, Trey looked like a nervous, sweating dog, constantly fidgeting in a suit that was clearly too expensive for him. He kept looking at his gold watch. The clock was ticking loudly on his luxury yacht payment. They both looked over at me, not with any real sadness, but with a cold, incredibly impatient confidence. They looked at me like I was already dead and buried. The heavy wooden door behind the bench opened. Judge Washington, a stern, no-nonsense African-American woman, entered the room. Everyone stood up. She sat down, adjusted her reading glasses, and looked over the massive stack of legal files. In the matter of the emergency conservatorship of Elijah, she said, her voice echoing loudly in the quiet room. Counsel for the petitioner, you may begin your opening statement. The lawyer representing Jada, a slick, shark-skinned man named Attorney Rollins, stood up quickly. Thank you, Your Honor, Rollins said, his voice dripping with practiced sincerity. Your Honor, we are gathered here today for a tragic but absolutely necessary reason. We are here to legally protect a man, a brilliant, hard-working man from his very own mind. Rollins began to paint a vivid picture of me for the judge. It was an absolute masterpiece of legal fiction. He described a beloved father, a strong pillar of the Atlanta community, who was now tragically lost in the thick fog of rapid cognitive decline. He spoke loudly of erratic daily behavior, profound confusion, and a highly disturbing lack of basic self-care. Over the past 6 months, Rollins said, his voice dripping with fake, cloying sympathy. My client, the devoted daughter of Mr. Elijah, has watched in absolute horror as her father has rapidly deteriorated. He has completely forgotten to pay key utilities, leaving him without power for days. He has become dangerously forgetful, setting off his own smoke alarms after leaving the kitchen stove burning. He gets completely lost in his very own neighborhood. He regularly loses his keys and his wallet. He calls his daughter 10-15 times a day, asking the exact same questions with absolutely no memory of the previous calls. I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped tightly on the wooden table. I looked directly at the judge. She was taking copious notes, her face a rigid mask of professional neutrality. This false narrative was actively working. The lies were clean, simple, and highly believable. These alarming incidents are not in isolation cause for this extreme, a measure Rollins continued pacing in front of his table. But, Your Honor, we are also here today because the significant estate of Elijah, an estate he built over a lifetime of hard work, is now at extreme risk. He is highly susceptible to undue influence. And that is exactly why my client, his loving daughter, had to step in immediately. She had absolutely no choice. We have provided in our initial petition a sworn medical declaration from one of the most respected forensic psychiatrists in the state. Your Honor, the petitioner calls Dr. Vance to the stand. Dr. Vance walked into the courtroom looking like $1 million. He was all silver hair and expensive custom tailoring. He was officially sworn in by the bailiff. He sat down in the witness box, looked directly at Judge Washington, and smiled his warm, professional, highly paid smile. Rollins began his direct examination. Dr. Vance, did you have occasion to personally meet with and carefully evaluate the respondent, Mr. Elijah? I did indeed, Dr. Vance said, his smooth, baritone voice filling the large room. I met with Elijah at his private home at the specific request of his daughter, Jada. We had a very long, very revealing conversation. And in your expert professional medical opinion, Rollins asked, what exactly did you find? I found a man in a state of tragic and quite rapid mental decline, Dr. Vance said, shaking his head sadly for the court. Elijah presents a classic, almost textbook triad of severe symptoms. Severe agitation, clear delusional paranoia, and significant, highly measurable cognitive impairment. I saw Desmond make a quick note on his legal pad, but I just stared coldly at Vance. The man was a phenomenal, highly paid performer. Can you please explain that for the court? Rollins asked. Of course, Dr. Vance replied smoothly. The physical agitation was immediate upon my arrival. He was incredibly hostile, aggressive, and clearly distressed by my simple presence. And the deep paranoia. Elijah is entirely consumed by a massive delusion that his own family is actively plotting against him. He has a specific fixed medical belief that his daughter, who is clearly just trying to help him, is viciously betraying him. He's also highly fixated on his late wife, claiming she was a literal prophet who warned him about this very day. This is a very common, though deeply tragic, manifestation of the disease. He is actively rewriting his own past to fit his deeply paranoid narrative. And the cognitive decline, Dr. Rollins asked, leaning heavily on the podium. Did you objectively test him for that? I did, Dr. Vance said, leaning forward in the witness box. I administered a standard clock drawing test, a very common, highly reliable tool to quickly assess cognitive function. And what were the specific results of that test? Rollins asked. They were profoundly disturbing, Dr. Vance said, looking at the judge with grave, practiced seriousness. Instead of drawing a simple functional clock face, Elijah became completely stuck. He exhibited an extreme obsessive-compulsive fixation. He could not complete the simple assigned task. He instead became totally lost in drawing the intricate internal gears. Vance actually pulled out my precise drawing, the perfect blueprint I had made, and he held it up for the judge to see. "You see, Your Honor," Vance explained, pointing at my beautiful work. He drew the entire escapement mechanism. This is absolutely not the action of a healthy, functioning mind. This is perseveration, a classic, undeniable symptom of severe frontal lobe damage. He was completely unable to follow a simple two-step instruction. Vance paused, letting the heavy silence fill the room. This was his big moment. This was the expensive kill shot. In my expert medical opinion, Dr. Vance concluded, his voice ringing with false authority. Based on my direct evaluation, my careful review of the family anecdotes, and this highly disturbing drawing test, Elijah is suffering from severe early-onset dementia, complicated by massive paranoid delusions. He absolutely lacks the mental capacity to manage his own affairs, financial or medical. He is, to put it plainly to this court, a grave danger to himself. He requires immediate round-the-clock supervision and the protective structure of a full conservatorship. Dr. Vance finally finished his testimony. The courtroom was dead silent. He had done exactly what he was paid to do. He had taken my true strength, my precise engineering mind, my absolute clarity, and he had viciously twisted it, reframed it entirely, and presented it to a judge as a symptom of total insanity. Rollins smiled, a greasy, victorious smile. "Thank you, doctor," he said. "Your witness, Mr. Desmond." Jada was looking across the aisle at me, her eyes shining with small fake tears. They were, I realized with absolute certainty, tears of pure triumph. She thought she had completely won. Trey was already looking back at his gold watch, as if he had a luxury yacht to catch this afternoon. I looked over at Desmond. My lawyer calmly stood up from our table. He picked up a single, very slim folder. He did not look worried at all. He looked like a man who was about to casually detonate a bomb. Desmond walked to the podium, his steps slow and highly deliberate. He did not carry a massive stack of files, just that one single folder. "Thank you, Your Honor," Desmond said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the silent courtroom. "And thank you, Dr. Vance, for that absolutely fascinating performance." Rollins jumped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor," he shouted. "Performance is commentary." Judge Washington waved him down. "It is just commentary, counsel," she said strictly. "Get on with your cross-examination, Mr. Desmond." "Certainly, Your Honor," Desmond said, opening his slim folder. "Dr. Vance, you testified today that you are a board-certified forensic psychiatrist." "I am," Dr. Vance said, adjusting his expensive silk cuffs. "And you are no doubt paid handsomely for your expert medical opinion?" Desmond asked. "Objection. Relevance," Rollins barked. "Withdrawn." Desmond said easily, not missing a single beat. "Doctor, you stated that your official report, which was filed with this court before this hearing, was based on your direct evaluation of my client." "That is completely correct," Dr. Vance said. "My evaluation and the extensive anecdotal history provided by his deeply concerned daughter." "Ah, yes, the anecdotal history," Desmond said, nodding slowly. "The highly convenient stories of forgetfulness and severe confusion. And based entirely on this, before you ever actually met my client, you had already formed a solid medical opinion, had you not?" "I had formed a working hypothesis," Dr. Vance said, his bright white smile slightly faltering, "based on the clear pattern of behavior. A hypothesis so incredibly strong that you felt totally comfortable writing and actually signing a sworn declaration that my client was incompetent before you ever laid eyes on him," Desmond asked, his voice rising in volume. "Is that correct? My in-person evaluation simply confirmed my preliminary findings?" Dr. Vance said, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Did it really? Dr. Desmond asked, stepping closer to the witness box. Because I would like to specifically talk about that profoundly disturbing clock drawing test. The confidence of Dr. Vance quickly returned. Yes, a classic, undeniable sign of perseveration. He was completely stuck, unable to complete a simple basic task. Dr. Desmond interrupted, his voice as sharp as a newly honed razor. Are you a structural engineer? No, Dr. Vance said, looking highly confused. I am a medical psychiatrist. Have you ever studied architectural drafting or complex structural engineering? Desmond asked. Of course not, Vance scoffed. Then you would have absolutely no way of knowing, would you, that what you are calling obsessive-compulsive perseveration is exactly what an engineer would call absolute precision. Vance blinked, totally caught off guard. You would not know, Desmond continued loudly, that my client did not just get stuck. He drew a perfect scaled and mechanically sound schematic of an analog clock escapement mechanism entirely from his own memory. Desmond turned to face the judge. Your Honor, my client did not fail a simple medical test. He completely aced a highly complex engineering one. He did something that I heavily doubt Dr. Vance or anyone else in this courtroom could ever do. He drew a flawless blueprint. Rollins was back on his feet. Objection, Your Honor, my colleague is actively testifying. Sustained, Judge Washington said, but she was looking at the drawing on her heavy desk with a brand new, highly intense curiosity. Mr. Desmond, do you have an actual question for this witness? I do, Your Honor, Desmond said. Dr. Vance, in your expert medical opinion, is it highly common for severe dementia patients to be able to actively recall from memory the precise gear and pallet fork mechanics of an analog clock? The deep artificial tan on the face of Dr. Vance suddenly looked a little green. Well, it is the fixation that is the true symptom. Just a simple yes or no, Dr. Desmond demanded. Is it common? No. Dr. Vance whispered, totally defeated. Thank you, Dr. Desmond said, turning his back on the man. No further questions for this witness. Desmond sat down. Rollins, seeing his entire case suddenly catching on fire, tried frantically to jump back in. Your Honor, the petitioner rests. We believe the medical evidence is completely clear, and we respectfully ask for the emergency petition to be granted. Judge Washington looked down at him, her eyebrows raised high. The petitioner rests after that specific cross-examination, she asked. That is a very bold move, counsel. Mr. Desmond, does the respondent have a case to present to this court? Desmond stood up again, his absolute calm never wavering for a single second. We do, Your Honor. The respondent calls Dr. Sterling to the stand. A massive stir went through the entire courtroom. Even the jaw of Attorney Rollins completely dropped. Jada, looking totally confused, looked frantically at her lawyer. Who is that? She whispered loudly. A moment later, Dr. Sterling walked into the room, radiating an undeniable heavy authority that made Vance look like a cheap traveling salesman. He was quickly sworn in. Desmond began. Dr. Sterling, please state your name and your profession for the court. I am Dr. Sterling, he said, his deep voice carrying easily. I am the chief of geriatric psychiatry at Emory University Hospital. I've been in active medical practice for 30 years. Dr. Vance, I actively noticed, was physically sinking down in his chair at the petitioner table. He knew exactly who Sterling was. Doctor, thank you for coming today, Desmond said. Did you have occasion to properly evaluate my client, Mr. Elijah? I did. Dr. Sterling said, his voice crisp and clear. At your specific request, I conducted a full 3-hour clinical evaluation of Elijah at his private home on Wednesday morning, the day before the chat with Dr. Vance. And what did your thorough evaluation consist of? Desmond asked. It consisted of a full medical history review, a verbal recall test, abstract reasoning puzzles, and of course the standard mini-mental state examination, Dr. Sterling explained. And what were your specific findings? Dr. Desmond asked, letting the tension build perfectly. My findings, Dr. Sterling said, putting on his reading glasses and opening his heavy file, were absolutely unequivocal. Elijah is well. He is one of the sharpest men his age I have ever had the distinct privilege of examining. Jada let out a small, highly strangled gasp from across the aisle. Dr. Vance testified. Desmond said loudly that my client suffers from severe paranoia, heavy agitation, and rapid cognitive decline. Did you find any medical evidence of this? Dr. Sterling gave a small, incredibly dry laugh. No, he said. I found evidence of intense anger. Highly justifiable anger. I found deep frustration. Highly justifiable frustration. What Dr. Vance lazily calls paranoia, the specific belief that his family is against him, I would call a perfectly accurate assessment of the situation. The man is under a hostile, highly fraudulent legal attack. He is not paranoid at all. He's entirely correct. Objection. Rollins shrieked, jumping up. He is opining on the legal case. Sustained, Judge Washington said, but she was leaning far forward, her eyes locked onto Dr. Sterling. Just stick to your specific medical findings, Doctor. My medical findings, Dr. Sterling continued without missing a beat, are that Elijah shows absolutely zero signs of dementia, agitation, or cognitive decline. What he does actually show is a perfect score on the mini mental state examination. He scored a 30 out of 30. 30, Desmond asked, acting perfectly surprised. What exactly does that mean for the layman in the room? It means a flawless score, Dr. Sterling said. It means he answered every single question perfectly. Recall orientation calculation. It is a high score I rarely ever see even in patients 20 years younger. The mind of this man is an absolute fortress. Dr. Sterling then turned with a cold, righteous, professional fury to address the fraudulent report filed by Vance. I have also, he said loudly, carefully reviewed the sworn declaration of Dr. Vance. And as a sworn officer of this court and as the head of my medical department, I am professionally appalled. His report is, to be perfectly blunt, a complete work of fiction. He has taken the precision and the high intelligence of Elijah, and he has deliberately, maliciously reframed it as obsession and total insanity. It is not only highly unprofessional, it is, in my expert medical opinion, a clear-cut case of severe medical malpractice and blatant fraud on this court. The courtroom was completely dead silent. Dr. Vance was frantically grabbing his expensive briefcase, looking for the nearest exit. I am officially submitting my own 13-page notarized report, Your Honor, Dr. Sterling said, handing the heavy document to the waiting bailiff, which states unequivocally that Elijah is not only fully competent, he is exceptionally competent, and he is quite clearly the direct victim of a highly predatory financial attack by his very own family. The face of Judge Washington was completely white with rage. She was not looking at the lawyers anymore. She was looking directly at Jada. Thank you, Dr. Desmond said, gently sitting back down. No further medical witnesses, Your Honor. The face of Judge Washington was a study in highly controlled, terrifying fury. She had just heard the damning testimony of Dr. Sterling, and she was staring intensely across the courtroom at Jada. Not at her lawyer, but directly at my daughter. The air inside the courtroom was practically crackling with heavy tension. Attorney Rollins, the slick lawyer for Jada, looked like he had been physically punched in the stomach. He was frantically shuffling his legal papers, clearly completely rattled by the total collapse of his medical expert. Mr. Desmond, Judge Washington said, her voice dangerously quiet in the large room. Does the respondent have anything further to add, or have we all heard entirely enough of this charade? Desmond stood up slowly from our table. Your Honor, he said, his voice as calm as a frozen winter lake. We have one final, highly critical piece of hard evidence. It speaks directly to the anecdotal history that the counsel for the petitioner, Mr. Rollins, was so incredibly fond of. It speaks directly to the specific help that the daughter of my client has been so eager to provide to him. Rollins, sensing a massive, fatal attack on his case, jumped frantically to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor," he shouted. "What is this new evidence? We have not been provided any discovery on this. We have already heard the medical testimony." "It is absolutely not medical testimony, counsel," Desmond said smoothly, not even looking at the panicked lawyer. "It is, however, a very clear, high-definition video recording. Your Honor, we would like to formally present Respondent's Exhibit C. A hidden video recording taken legally inside the private home of Mr. Elijah in his own living room just last week. A massive jolt of electricity went through the silent room. Jada, who had been staring at the broad back of Dr. Sterling with pure, unadulterated hatred, whipped her head around to look directly at me. Her beautiful face was for the very first time today not smug and not fake crying. It was completely pale, washed out, with genuine primal animal fear. A video recording, Judge Washington asked, her eyebrows raising high on her forehead. "Mr. Desmond, on what exact legal grounds are you presenting a hidden recording in my courtroom?" "On the solid grounds, Your Honor," Desmond said, his voice booming with absolute authority, "that it is a perfect first-hand recording of an active felony in progress, specifically severe fraud against the elderly. We are firmly alleging that this entire conservatorship petition is not just completely baseless, but is actually the second highly calculated step in a massive criminal conspiracy to completely defraud my client. The very first step of that crime is documented perfectly on this video." Objection. Rollins was practically yelling now, his face turning bright red. "This is absolutely outrageous, Your Honor. A hidden recording. Georgia is a one-party consent state for phone calls, but hidden video in a private residence is highly restricted. It is completely inadmissible." Desmond just waited patiently for the frantic lawyer to finish his shouting. "Your Honor," Desmond said, turning back to face the judge directly. "As I'm absolutely sure you are already aware, the privacy laws of our state have a very clear, highly specific exception. The law certainly does not apply to protect a person who is actively in the process of committing a felony and actively attempting to trick a 72-year-old man into illegally signing a durable power of attorney under entirely false pretenses. That action, Your Honor, is a severe felony." The dark eyes of Judge Washington completely narrowed. "I will be the final judge of that, Mr. Desmond," she said strictly. "Do you have this specific video queued up and ready to play?" "We do, Your Honor," Desmond confirmed. "The court bailiff already has the secure digital file." "Then you may proceed immediately," Judge Washington commanded. The large flat-screen monitors in the courtroom, which had been completely dark all morning, suddenly flickered brightly to life. And suddenly my quiet suburban living room was on full display for the entire court to see. The camera angle from the fireplace mantel was absolutely perfect. It showed the glass coffee table, the heavy armchair where Jada had confidently sat, and me resting on the edge of the sofa. The video was completely silent for a brief moment, and then the front door opened, and Jada walked confidently into the room. "That woman," Desmond said, his voice narrating the footage for the court, "is the petitioner, Jada, entering the private home of my client last Tuesday afternoon." The entire courtroom watched in dead silence. I watched myself on the screen, perfectly playing the part of the tired, slightly weary old man. I saw my daughter in her expensive designer clothes, sitting down, placing her heavy leather folio in her lap. "Now, Your Honor," Desmond said clearly. "Please listen very closely to the captured audio." We all heard the voice of Jada, bright and completely fake, echo loudly in the silent courtroom. "Now, Daddy," her voice said from the speakers, "this is nothing to worry about. It is just some simple tax forms, standard government stuff. It just lets me and Trey talk to your accountant, handle the complicated bills. You know, simplify things for your retirement." I saw Attorney Rollins physically flinch at his table. That was absolutely not what his client had told him. Then the video camera zoomed in tightly, exactly as I had done on my laptop at home. It showed the thick stack of legal papers. It showed the left hand of Jada. And it showed her perfectly manicured red-nailed thumb pressing down incredibly hard on the very top of the page. "There are just a few places you need to sign, Daddy," her video self cooed. Then my video self, playing his assigned part, squinted closely at the paper. "Oh my. So many legal words," I said on the screen. "What does that say up at the top?" The entire courtroom, the judge heavily included, leaned forward in their seats. The voice of Jada on the video was suddenly tight and deeply annoyed.